Alrighty. Dude, I'm excited for this episode. I think this one's
Yeah,
going to be good.
yeah.
Yeah,
Whoa. For all the viewers, hello. Welcome back to Brown Boys Theory.
exactly.
As you guys have already heard, this is going to be an exciting episode.
hmm Yeah, and also by the time that this video is uploaded, it's actually going to be March 16th, which is actually the day before my birthday. So I'm going to be turning 19 on the 17th.
Happy early birthday.
Yeah. I mean, we're probably going to make a...
I mean, we're going to
Yeah, shoot.
meet before that, right?
Yeah.
But like for
Yeah.
all the viewers, make sure to wish Anisha happy birthday on the 17th.
Yeah, and turning 19 is basically turning 18, except just not as cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
For all of you guys that watched our previous episodes, you guys know what we're talking about.
Exactly, yeah. And for those
Yeah.
who are turning 19, you guys will probably understand as well.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, but
Just
today
sad,
we
yeah.
have a very special episode. We're bringing on someone who's a lot different than our usual guests. Usually it's like one of SANKALP'S friends, and we just kind of talk about stuff that we go through as college students and things like that.
Mhm.
But today we actually have a real college professor with us talking about his experience being a professor at Sac State. He was my first year freshman professor doing philosophy, so super excited to bring him on. Alrighty, should we do it?
Let's do it.
Let's bring him on. All right, so we're just introducing our professor. So right now he's here. And Professor, do you want to give a little bit of an introduction about yourself, who you are, what you do?
Sure. My name's Joshua Carboni. I am a professor of philosophy at California State University, Sacramento. I also am a professor of philosophy at the University of San Francisco. I've been teaching for close to 20 years. I know my youthful appearance doesn't make it seem that way, but I have been teaching for close to 20 years. I started teaching in the South Bronx, actually, when I was, not the South Bronx, the Bronx, when I was a graduate student. And since that time, I've taught really all over the place. I've taught not only in New York, but I've taught at various schools in California and so forth. So that's me.
Yeah. And for like your history behind Sac State, was it like always your initial plan to be a professor, or did you ever plan like being something else?
That's a great question. So I actually went to grad school with the intent of going into publishing, which I did a very, very brief stint in, and quickly realized that I didn't really care for it. It also kind of happened at the time in which publishing was hurting as an industry. So it was going to be much more difficult to kind of find a job. And then I kind of just fell into teaching. I mean, I did teach when I was in grad school, like I said, to kind of just pay my rent. But it wasn't really my intention to get into it. And then I grew tired of New York for various reasons and decided to move back to California. And Sacramento has a lot of good schools. So there was a lot of opportunity that kind of just popped up. And I haven't stopped ever since.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's great. So what drew you to Sac State and the University of San Francisco?
Well, I mean, to be completely honest, what drew me to Sac State and the University of San Francisco is that they had an open position. And that's often the way it goes. They had an open position in the city that I currently, resided or, in the area that I currently resided in. And a lot of times as an instructor, you are kind of subject to that. It's very uncommon that as a professor, you get to choose the location that you're going to live, or, as opposed to, hey, this city in this state has an open position and I'm going to apply to that position. And hopefully I'll get it, that kind of thing. So, I kind of got lucky. I grew up in Sacramento, so I moved back to Sacramento knowing that there were good schools in the area, and just kind of with my fingers crossed, and it worked out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And especially, with last year going into online college, like how was the transition? Because I know it was definitely a struggle for both students and, teachers getting into learning how, Zoom and everything works.
Yeah, so I had no experience with Zoom. I had I had a good amount of experience with hybrid style classes, but really nothing in terms of, say, synchronous online teaching. So for me, it was, I mean, I'm not, there are a lot of professors that are, I don't know if on, in a live, in a podcast, I should throw my colleagues under the bus, but there's a lot of professors out there who are not very, technologically savvy, right? So I figure I'm kind of in the middle. So that really wasn't a problem for me, but really just figuring out how to even go about doing this, what it was going to be like, that was a shock at first. Since I've been doing it for almost a year now, I think that I've gotten significantly better than how I started, but it's still just weird is what it is. It's still not the reason I got into teaching. It still lacks a lot of the benefits that I think face-to-face instruction has, not just for the student, but also just for me as an instructor. It's been difficult. I would say it's been very difficult. And then, also to manage on top of that, just daily life outside of having to teach over Zoom. So, Anish, you might recall, I've mentioned this quite a bit in my class, that I have an 8-year-old son who's also doing online learning in the other room at the same time that I'm teaching. And there's going back and forth between my classes and helping him with his work. So, it's challenging, I think, all around. But as I said, I do think that instructors are getting better at it, and hopefully we're getting better at it at the time in which we will, right about the time in which we will no longer need to do it. But we'll see about that.
Yeah, and I just want to say that I'm super thankful for having you as my professor, since I know how much energy you brought onto the session, and trying to make us all smile and kind of just pretend as if we were actually in class, even though we were online. So I was really grateful of that. And how is it trying to bring that same energy of trying to make all the kids alert and attentive in class, and trying to keep their attention, since everything's online.
Yeah, first off, I appreciate you saying that, Anish. That's very nice. It is more tiring actually trying to engage in the way that, so there's different ways that instructors have really gone about this process for those who had never done it before. There are some instructors who completely redesigned their courses, and then there are other instructors who kind of did their best to translate, especially not knowing how long we were going to be, but did their best to translate how they normally taught and the material they normally taught into this kind of Zoom or whatever environment they happen to be using, this online environment. And for me personally, I kind of did a hybrid of the two. I tried to rework all of my content so that it would be a bit more flashy and a bit more kind of eye-catchy, as opposed to just having a white a PowerPoint with black writing up on the screen. I tried to make it very interactive in that way, to give students something on each slide to look at and to pay attention to, and it has, so that aspect is kind of fun for me to do, actually. But the actual teaching part of it, so I'm very engaging in class, or at least I try to be very engaging in class. I try to bring a lot of energy to my actual teaching. I think that actually helps students in the long run. And doing that over Zoom while I'm sitting in a chair has strangely been more tiring. So I find that once I'm done with a class, in this environment, I am actually more tired than I was previous, as I was in the classroom face to face. And I've read some stuff about that, actually, concerning the amount of things you have to pay attention to as someone running a class at the same time. So your eyes are kind of shifting all over the place, and you're focusing on this, and then you're focusing on that, and that can be a little bit more tiring than what we normally would get in the classroom. So that might explain that. But I've found it to be a little bit more tiring in the long run. And it's definitely a lot more work, strangely enough. I mean, I don't have to get in my car and drive to campus and find parking and, walk to my classroom or walk to my office like I used to. I only have to walk 5 feet in my small house to my closet / office that I converted for this. So that's kind of nice, and you think that would be really easy, but it's strangely more work. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry,
So,
I'm giving these
Professor,
very long, kind of tangential answers. Sorry about
No,
that.
it's all good. It's all good.
no, it's all good. I just had a two-parter question. Like, first and foremost, do you teach all years of students, or is it just specific to
So I
fresh?
teach all years of students. I usually teach critical thinking at Sacramento State. It is philosophy 4,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a different number at different schools. But I usually teach that class each semester, and the majority of students are either freshmen or sophomores in that class. Every once in a while, a junior or a senior will pop in, but usually it's a first year student or an early second year student who's taking that course. But I also teach upper division courses. I teach philosophy of science very regularly. Uh, every once in a while, I'll teach a business ethics class if that's needed. But so it kind of runs the gamut.
Okay, and in your experience through the virtual environment, which year would you say, or like which class would you say is the most engaging? Like I know for us in high school as seniors, when we went virtual for the second half of the year, we were pretty decently engaged in classes. But then I also heard that freshmen just weren't. It
Yeah.
may be the complete opposite in college. So what's your experience been like with that?
So my experience kind of falls in line with your experience there. So the more, I'll just call them seasoned students, your third and fourth year students, your students who are mainly taking upper division courses. They tend to be more engaged. They were more engaged overall than my classes that dealt mainly with freshmen and sophomores. Um, I also have I usually teach mega sections, we call them at Sacramento State. So it's 120 plus students, right? So it's a bit harder to get them engaged in an online environment than it is in the classroom. I can do things like breakout rooms and things like that, which tend to help a little bit. But in terms of engaging directly with the class, I can't even get them to turn on their camera most of the time. So they're certainly not engaging in that way. Well, let's see. Last semester, I taught philosophy of science, as I mentioned before, which is that upper division course, and that course contained mostly juniors and a couple seniors, third year students and a couple fourth year students, and they were far more engaged than any other class that I've ever taught. So I think that students who have been in college for a while and did get all of the traditional college experience that students get when they first go to college were more okay, I'll say, with making the transition to the online environment than students who this was their first year in college and all of a sudden they're in an online environment when they weren't expecting to be. I know that students probably had that from high school before, but yeah, there's a lot that students I think are missing out on as freshmen and sophomores that the juniors and seniors already got, so they're just more prepared, I think, mentally,
Mm-hmm.
just more prepared.
Yeah. And I know, especially now with the vaccine rollout for COVID, I know now they're doing a lot of more of like professors and teachers. And I was wondering if you're planning on getting it soon, and also kind of like your thoughts, I guess, on the pandemic, and if you think it's going to end, later this year. What's your thoughts on it?
Sure. So I've already gotten my first shot, the Pfizer vaccine, through Sacramento State, because they are, as you mentioned, trying to vaccinate all their instructors so that come fall, we are ready to be back in the classroom, which is great. And I don't know. I work off the assumption that the majority of people, professors at Sac State are probably getting that right now. but it was difficult to find out about. It wasn't advertised, so I did have to kind of be on the ball for that. But I do anticipate that by fall they will have all of their instructors vaccinated, and I would imagine they'll probably start working on students as well. In terms of my thoughts on the pandemic, it has been a struggle, to say the least. I mean, it is it it's been very depressing. I'll just say that. I mean, I am. My wife and I have been very careful. You know, we do leave the house on occasion, but you know, we basically stuck to the stay-at-home order as it was requested, and haven't left the house that much except to go to the grocery store, perhaps very carefully, for the past year. And you know, my son hasn't been to a playground in God knows how many months now. Yeah, I mean, it's just life is so different, and life is so challenging at this point that it's just, I'm ready for it all to be over. So I'm very happy that the vaccine rollout is beginning. I hope that it gets more effective. I cannot wait to get back into the classroom. But you know, we'll have to see how all that goes. Yeah, it's been a challenge. I mean, in terms of, so I notice you guys are in the same room, which is great, by the way, because I haven't seen my friends in almost a year. So it's very nice that you guys are able to be in the same room. And you know, I listened to a couple episodes of your podcast. I'm a big fan of podcasts in general, and I found your podcast to be engaging and very, very interesting for me in particular, because it gave me the student perspective on a lot of these issues that I'm just not getting. You know, because students generally aren't willing to kind of speak up in class about how they're feeling, which I totally understand. I mean, that's difficult to do around a group of people that you have only seen their video online, and you don't know them in person. So how has it been for you guys as students?
Yeah, I guess I'll go first. Yeah, I mean, as you said, it's been a struggle, like definitely trying to get like that, you know, attentiveness, especially with like professors or other students. Or honestly, I think the biggest thing for me in particular is like just, I guess, trying to know other students. Especially, I know for freshmen, one of the biggest things is trying to build relationships and, you know, try to find like new friend groups to, you know,
Absolutely.
join and stuff. Yeah. And especially as like a computer science student, I know a lot of computer science students are pretty, you know, not as active on social media, or, you know, don't really talk too much. So it's been difficult for me to like find like a group to kind of talk to and, you know, find that. But yeah, like I feel like that's probably been like the biggest struggle for it.
Yeah, that's one of those things I was mentioning that is really lacking at this point. You know, there is a whole college experience that students get when they first start college that is exciting and challenging and you know, sometimes nerve-wracking. But you know, I still have friends to this day that I made my first year in college. You know, this is a very, very long time ago, we'll just say. Not that long ago, I guess, but so students are really missing out on that. And I think that, I mean, there'll have to be a lot of studies done on this in the future, and I'm sure that there'll be a lot of papers written on this, as well as distance learning during this time. But I'm curious to see exactly what outcomes ultimately are going to be based on outcomes are going to be for an entire, you know, 4-year experience. You know, are lots of students going to have issues later on because they didn't develop those friendships that kind of help carry them through the difficult times of college? And then also in the classroom, you know, the amount of times that I would walk into a classroom and there are students who didn't know each other prior to taking my class, having conversations, talking about going out and having study groups, or just helping each other with work, or even just having a conversation about the weather. I mean, it doesn't even matter. Just that type of human interaction with people that are in the same boat as you can be very helpful during difficult times, and we're really missing that, and students are really missing that. The fact that I can't walk down the hall and in my department and just have a conversation with one of my colleagues that I've known for now 10 years is it kind of sucks. So I would imagine it also sucks for students, but I think that I think that it's probably even worse for students because they're really missing out on a lot of those college experiences. Hopefully, when we come back, students will be able to get those experiences. You guys are freshmen, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you fall exactly into this boat, and ANISH'S, as you said, you're kind of, you don't have that connection with your fellow students. I mean, it's really a benefit to make friends with not just people all over the college, whether it's, your dorm mate who happens to be in a completely different major. But it's really important, I think, to make friends within your major because you work with each other, you help each other. And without that, you're going to just be behind in that. And I feel for students who find themselves in that position.
Yeah, for me, I'm a comms major, public relations, so it's been a little easier for me, I would say, just because we have to communicate a lot, even in Zoom.
Yeah.
And our professors tell us that you have to turn your camera on, and we're pretty active in breakout rooms. So it's been decent, I would say, for me, being able to meet people. But it's definitely weird. Like, we have our group chats that we've made throughout classes, and just being able to like text someone, sure, it's a benefit, but it's really weird to like text someone multiple times a day and be like, I have no idea what this person looks like, or I don't know how tall this person even is, or like how they act in person. So it's definitely weird.
Yeah. I really encourage my classes to kind of form an outside group chat so they could, talk smack about me during the class or whatever, just because that's going to help them unite in some way. Well, that's great that you've had that kind of contact. But I do understand that point that you are texting, you're communicating with people that you have no idea what they look like. And that can be kind of weird. So yeah, one of the issues that I've run into is that there was a lot of confusion about what professor rights versus student rights were going to be in these situations. For example, I'm not really allowed in my classes. Other classes are a little bit different depending upon what the need for the class is. But in my classes, I'm not really allowed to ask students to turn on their cameras. I can't require them to turn on their cameras. So I sit in my office and basically lecture to myself, thinking that there are 120 students out there when maybe one or two of them has their camera on, and the rest of them don't. And that's very weird. So kind of in the same kind of vein, I'm lecturing to students who I don't know what they look like. I've never seen them before. I've never met them before. And that's for me, that's a little weird because I really like the student connection, the one-to-one connection that I get, the physical, face-to-face connection that I get in the in-classroom environment. And I don't, it's very strange. Sometimes I feel like I'm talking to myself.
Yeah, no, definitely. Do you have another question, Anish?
I guess another question that I had was like, how do you manage your time? Because I know managing your time in person and online is much different. So just like kind of like your day-to-day schedule.
Sure. So let me just answer that very quickly and say, not well. I don't manage my time well at all. I'm usually very structured, but I have found that over the past year that the structure that I have that I used to have is kind of not there anymore. But in terms of I mean, this might be a little bit boring the way I lay it out, but I don't know. But so in terms of my day-to-day schedule, basically, this semester I'm teaching on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and that includes daytime and nighttime or evening classes. So on Mondays and Wednesdays, I am basically teaching from 9 in the morning until 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. There are some significant breaks in there. And then on Fridays, I decided to make all of my classes asynchronous that I teach on Friday, so that I just post a lecture, kind of gives me a break and gives the students a break. Usually I would teach 5 days a week, so it'd be a bit different. But so basically my day is that I start teaching around 9 o'clock in the morning. That usually follows my either getting my son set up for his online learning, or assisting my wife in getting my son set up for online learning, then rushing into the office, teaching a class, rushing out of the office, and trying to help my son with his work, and then rushing back into the office and trying to have office hours, and trying to grade and trying to kind of review lectures that I have coming up, maybe record a lecture if I have an asynchronous lecture that I have to post. And I just kind of do that from 9 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, at least 3 days a week. Last semester, it was more like 5 days a week I was doing that. This semester is a little bit lighter. Spring semesters are usually lighter in terms of load anyway, in terms of the amount of classes that you teach. So it's been a little bit better, but that's basically my day. A lot of rushing around, a lot of trying to fit work into small time frames that I normally would like to spend a little bit more on. Being constantly distracted by not just what's going on in my house, my dog barking, or the mailman coming, or the gardener trying to mow the lawn in the backyard, something like that. My son who needs help with something. But just trying to fit things into a small time frame window. I also find that, and this might just be me, hopefully it's not, but that like I said, I basically took my closet. I have this walk-in closet. I have a very small home here in Sacramento, and I have this walk-in closet that I essentially converted into an office. Now, you can't tell it's a walk-in closet by the video that I have, and this is also the same video that I would kind of show all of my students. It's a very typical kind of office environment, but I've got tons of clothes over to the side that, at least early on in the pandemic, when I first started teaching here, I made sure that I hung up and were very nice, and now they're just in big kind of lumps over in the corner. But it's also right outside of my bedroom, which means that I'm teaching this class that for some reason is making me a little bit more tired than I normally would get teaching in the classroom. And then I walk past my bed and I've got this 2-hour window between class, and I think, well, a nice little nap would be good. So I find that there's also a few more, very quick naps that I end up taking on a day-to-day basis that I normally wouldn't take. I'm kind of embarrassed to admit that, but that's what it is.
I mean, outside of school, what are some things that you enjoy doing? Like what are some of your hobbies? Because I mean, obviously, being a professor, that's something, but there's so much more to you as a person. So, what are some of your hobbies?
Yeah, so that's funny because I remember when I was a student so many years ago that it was often difficult to think about, what your professors were like outside of the classroom, right, or outside of their office. You wondered even if they were people that had hobbies. So that's I appreciate you asking that. So I obviously I have an 8-year-old son, so there's a lot of stuff that he and I will do together, whether it's build Legos or read or whatever. Just go outside and play soccer or something like that. But personally, my outside of teaching and outside of my family, my passion is surfing. So I try and spend as much time that I can doing that, as much time as I can.
Yeah. And I know we talked about like a lot of the negatives, especially with the pandemic, but like what are the positives that you've had? I know like we don't have to drive to campus or park or anything like that. So I know that's a
Yeah,
big plus.
yeah, that is surprisingly. I'm gonna miss that. I mean, I'm gonna love being back in the classroom, and I really don't enjoy. I know you said we focused on a lot on the negatives, and here I go again with some negatives. I really don't enjoy teaching this way, and I'm gonna love being back in the classroom. But it is really nice that I can roll out of bed 10 minutes before I have to teach a class in the morning. I'm not a morning person. When you guys said that you wanted to record at 8 o'clock in the morning, there was a slight sense of dread that fell over me because I am not a morning person at all. I tend to do all of my work in the evenings at night and at night. So being able to get up at 8:30 to teach a 9 o'clock in the morning class, well, that's quite nice. I will miss part of that. Just in terms of, and I even hate to say this because it's hard to think about benefits in the pandemic in general, but there is part of me that has noticed that even in Sacramento, that out on the streets there's just more traffic and more traffic and more traffic every day, and it was very nice if I did have to go somewhere during the kind of height of the pandemic, say during the summer months, where it would take me no time at all to get anywhere. If I had to go to the store, it would be a very quick trip because nobody was there. There was no traffic, to get there and so forth. So, I am kind of going to miss that aspect. Like I said, I do like to surf, and I have had the opportunity to kind of go down to the beach a couple times during the pandemic, at least very carefully, of course, the entire time. And being able to drive to San Francisco or Santa Cruz, here in California, which is normally about a 2.5, 3 hour trip, maybe even 3.5 hour with traffic here in California. Having no traffic at all, it was nice for that as well. So, I will miss that. I do also tend to be a little misanthropic. So, I do tend to get a lot of energy being alone. A lot of people, they get energy from others, right? So if they need to recharge their batteries after a tough week or a tough day, that they might want to see people. Well, I do very well in terms of recharging my batteries just by myself. So it's been kind of nice to have the forced by myselfness, if you know what I mean. I have no choice but to spend a lot of time with myself. So it's been nice in that regard. But yeah, the depressing news that's everywhere, the political turmoil that's everywhere, the fact that so many people have suffered as a result of this, I'm definitely not gonna miss any of that. I mean, I'm a human being, right? So that's gonna be nice to see that to not have to know that people are out there experiencing stuff like that is gonna be nice. That's kind of the understatement of the year, I know, but yeah. What I'm really curious about moving forward is what the distance learning outcomes are going to be. Like I mentioned, I have never been a fan of distance learning, and it wasn't because I felt that it was an inferior model or anything like that. It was more that it just didn't fit my kind of teaching style. It just didn't fit the way that I like to conduct my classes. And as a result, because I feel like I am, fairly adept at delivering material in the way that I like to deliver material, I did not think that it would therefore translate to good learning outcomes for my students if it was in an online environment. So what I'm curious about is what are the outcomes for students that are measured in the future? What is not only the long-term effect for students who say entered college when you guys entered college, which is during the first year of this pandemic, but also what are the learning outcomes for students who were already in school? I know that there was a lot of debate about the value of distance learning before the pandemic, and I don't think that's going to stop. There was a lot of back and forth I remember reading a few papers on it, on outcomes prior to the pandemic, and there was really no consensus, no data that definitely showed one way of delivering material was better than another way. It kind of was really up to the student as an individual. If a student chose to take an online class, then they tended to succeed in that class. But if they were forced into it, then they didn't tend to succeed. And what we've seen over the past year is thousands upon thousands of students who were forced into this environment that they didn't sign up for, that they didn't want to do. So what are the learning outcomes going to be for those type of students, and then also just what type of trauma are we all going to suffer as a result of this? I was living in San Francisco in 2001, about to move to New York to start graduate school, when there when 9/11 happened. Oh, I hate to say that. When September 11th happened, and that changed everything, right? So what is the change that's going to be the result of this? I mean, now when I go to the airport, I have to take off my shoes, and I remember for most of my life going to the airport, I didn't have to do those types of things. For most of my life, I was able to go to the gate and sit and wait for so and so's plane to land when I went to the airport. But now I can't. So how is this going to impact us? I mean, this is a year of trauma that we all it's a global trauma that we're all suffering. So what is the psychological impacts of this going to be? And then also just what are the physical impacts going to be? How is our physical environment going to change as a result of it? Are we still going to maintain that 6 feet distancing when all this is done? Are those stickers going to stay on the floor in the grocery store or wherever we happen to be? I'm kind of curious about that. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, we're both definitely curious about that. I think we've probably talked about it like earlier on the podcast too, of like long-term effects. I know one of the questions we were talking about is like how is it gonna like affect younger kids? Like I know your son, like he's 8 years old, and I know going to campus and going to school. I know it gives you like a learning habits, like how to communicate with others and things like that. So like for long-term effects, like how is that gonna work out for them? So
yeah, I don't think that it's going to be good. I mean, I'm not a psychologist. It's not my field of expertise, but just looking at my son and looking at even students that I have that are your guys' age, I don't think it's going to be great. Yeah, you said it exactly right. I think, Anish, that learning habits are established from students going to campus, like especially younger students. And here's a year of my son not getting those habits, and I can't see that that's going to be in any way a good thing in the long run.
Yeah, and kind of to add on to that, another aspect of school, more than just learning, is kind of like we're talking about the social aspect. And I know, especially in public school, there's things that you have to deal with. Even in private school, I don't have any experience with private school. I was always in public school, but there's just things that you have to deal with, whether it be like the simple stuff like we see on a daily basis, like bullying. Bullying is a very big problem in schools.
Mm-hmm.
Or just learning to stand up for yourself as an individual.
Yeah.
Right? I feel like those things are definitely going to take a hit because of this pandemic. Kids aren't they don't have the experience of standing up for themselves in a face-to-face situation, because everything's virtual. If you don't like something, you can just turn off your camera. No one has to see you, no one has to hear you.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's definitely going to take a toll when people come back to in person.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I never even thought about that. I mean, certainly I've thought a little bit about the social aspect, as I kind of mentioned earlier, that I feel that a lot of incoming college students are missing out on. But I never thought, and I think about the social aspect for my son as well, that he doesn't get to see his friends, right? I think he's seen his best friend maybe 5 times over the past year, which is and he's 8. That's really hard. When I was 8, I saw my best friend almost every day, right? So So yeah, but I never even thought about kind of the confidence, the self-confidence aspect of it, and the bullying aspect of it. Uh, I wonder. I mean, again, I'm not an expert in this field, but I certainly do. You got me thinking about, well, knowing that bullying tends to be the result of some sort of trauma that individuals are suffering from, right? And that everybody is going to be suffering from some level of trauma once this is over. That we're all going to have to kind of reckon with and reflect on and deal with. That is the bullying situation going to be even worse? I mean, it's interesting I think the question itself is interesting. And I wonder what public schools are going to do to help combat that. If there is a horrible thing that happens in a school, which unfortunately does happen with some regularity here in the United States, but when something horrible happens in a school, they often will bring in trauma specialists, right, to kind of help students, manage their emotions and their trauma through once they return. And I wonder if there's going to be something like that might be offered. My son has no real idea what any of this is. I mean, he's 8 and he's smart and he's very perceptive, and he'll mention the pandemic. He knows what COVID-19 is. He knows that people are getting sick, and that's why we wear masks when we go to the grocery store, or that's why he's not in school for the year, and so forth. But he's also 8, so he doesn't really understand what all this is, and that means that he's not going to be able to have the tools, I think, to deal with the trauma that he's bound to suffer as a result of this. I've read quite a few articles over the past few months about how this is going to affect children, and there is really nothing good that ever comes out of any of these articles. There's really no positives that I take from any of these articles. The overall message is it's not going to go well. And we're going to have to figure out what to do to kind of help students, to help kids through what they're feeling as a result of this. So I think bullying and the impact that this is going to have on bullying is a very interesting question.
Yeah, and I guess it's also a question for our audience as well, for those who are listening and viewing. Like, what do you guys think about it? And you guys can definitely let us know your thoughts.
Yeah, and more than that, if you guys ever feel alone, like both Anish and I are here for you guys. For any of you guys listening, we'd love to hear you guys' story. That's actually one of the reasons we created this podcast.
Exactly, yeah.
Was to not only tell our story, but to hear other people's story, which is why we've had so many guests and why we continue to have guests. It's definitely difficult.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think that's fantastic. That's a great service to do. And I can tell you personally that, I mean, I've been a podcast listener since probably like 2005. I mean, I started listening when I would put them on my little iPod Shuffle, which I don't even know if you guys know what the hell that is. But lately, over the past year, I can definitely say that the amount of podcasts that I've listened to has more than doubled, right? Not just because now I feel like I have a lot more time that I'm sitting at home and trying to do this or that, accomplish this chore or that chore, but it's just nice to hear voices of people. So yeah, it is a service that you guys are providing. That's great. And I, like I said at the outset, I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah. And I guess another question I have is, like, what got you into philosophy? I know, like, there's many different topics you can do as a professor. So why philosophy?
Sure. So it's kind of almost a hackneyed or traditional story, an overtold story. But I had a professor when I was, a freshman in college, who I just clicked with, and that was a philosophy professor. Actually, it wasn't a freshman. I was more of a sophomore in college. And I just clicked with this professor. And I remember one day that I was outside of class. This is immediately following class, and the professor was probably walking back to his office, and I was just sitting on a bench on campus, and the professor walked by me, and he referred to me as the master of all things known. He said, "Hey, there's the master of all things known." And looking back at it, he was probably being sarcastic. Although I did well in the class, but he was probably being sarcastic. But it really kind of made me feel good, and it made me feel special, and it really piqued my interest in who this guy was as a professor, and then that kind of translated into what he does or did as a professor. So yeah, I mean, it was the result of one professor in particular. And then I just took some other philosophy classes, after this professor's class. It was just, an AA class, a class to get my associate's degree, or to complete general education requirement at university. And that's the way we tend to talk about it nowadays. I didn't really think about much of it when I signed up for it. I thought that I might get into anthropology at first, but my interest was piqued, and I never looked back. I not only majored in it as an undergrad, but I also minored in it as an undergrad. So I basically did nothing but take philosophy classes, or philosophy adjacent classes. Yeah. And that, unfortunately, it is kind of, I mean, my version of it might be a little unique, but the idea that, hey, it was one professor who got me really interested in it, that I think it's probably everybody who majors in philosophy probably has that story. In fact, it's probably everybody who majors in whatever they major in, if they change majors or they go in undeclared, at least, probably has that kind of experience.
Mm-hmm.
What made you choose computer science, Anish?
I mean, growing up, I've just been really into tech. My dad, he works at Intel as a software engineer, and especially during Kids to Work Day, like whenever I just see the inventions and stuff that they make there, I've always been interested in it. So I thought it was always an interesting field, and I know there's a lot of jobs and opportunities as well for getting into.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, both of your majors, actually, it's a good career choice, I would say. Certainly. Sankalp, what got you interested in public relations?
Well, I grew up around, my dad was, he's an IT consultant, and I tried it in middle school. I looked into it a little bit. It just I could not do it. I just couldn't handle the tech stuff or the coding situation. My older brother, he goes to UC Irvine. He loves that stuff, and I never got into it. One thing I've always been good at is talking. And it's gonna sound a little bad, but making bad things seem good and talking my way out of situations. So I kind of just followed what came to me.
Sure. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. You should major in what you are good at. I mean, I think that's a good idea. What you enjoy and what you're good at, certainly. I mean, if I was in it for the money, I probably wouldn't have majored in philosophy. But there was, I probably shouldn't say that since people are going to listen to this. But major in philosophy, everybody. But yeah, it's more of just a passion. And if you don't follow your passions, you're probably going to be bored. So certainly do that.
Yeah. And I guess one thing I have before we end off our video portion, since we also do a audio portion, just rapid fire Q&As. But one thing I wanted to talk about is, do you know the TV show that's recently been airing called WandaVision?
I do know of the show, but I have not watched it. So don't spoil it, because I definitely have followed the Marvel universe. So I will watch it at some point. But go ahead.
Because I won't spoil it for you or anyone who's watching who hasn't watched it yet. I know
I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah. But there's one thing in the final episode, since the final episode just aired last Friday. Yeah. And it's actually a philosophical quote that two people in the show were actually talking about, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it. So they're talking about the thing about the Ship of Theseus. I don't know if you know about like the
I
philosophical term
do.
about it.
Yeah,
Yeah, about like
sure.
you know, an artifact in the museum. Over time, its planks of wood rot and are replaced with new planks. When no original plank remains, is still the Ship of Theseus. Yeah.
Yeah. So this dates back to the ancient Greeks, right? This kind of thought experiment ultimately, and it has a lot of different applications. So um, the way that I tend to apply it is in um, uh, discussions about um, the mind body problem in philosophy. So the mind body problem essentially is the question, it's a metaphysical question, which is what is a mind? Is a mind a physical thing, or is a mind more of like an immaterial thing? Um, and for me, the mind is more of a physical thing. So, you know, when I think of a mind, I think of a brain, while others who think of a mind might think of something else. You know, this is, like I said, debated within philosophy. And the Ship of Theseus is often used as a thought experiment to kind of um, help us understand the actual problem. So, you know, essentially you have this, and you just summarized it, but I'll do it again. So you have this ship that over a period of time is traveling into this dock, and every time it travels into the dock, a piece of the ship is replaced one by one, let's say. And over a long period of time, you have every single piece of the ship replaced, every physical piece of that ship replaced. Um, so the question then is this still the ship Theseus? When that ship then, for the last time, after it's had 100% of its physical pieces replaced over time, when that ship sails away, is that ship still the ship Theseus? Now, even to complicate it a little bit more, let's say that I had all of those pieces that I had taken off. Let's say that I'm the boat builder, essentially, or the boat repairer at this dry dock, and over this period of a year, when this ship has come in, I've replaced these pieces periodically, and I've saved every single piece that I've taken off this ship. So for every piece that I replace, I have its corresponding older piece in a warehouse somewhere, let's say. And then once I replace 100% of these pieces on this ship that comes into my dock, I go to that warehouse and I refurbish all those pieces and I put the boat together. Now, the back of that boat, it's going to say Theseus. The back of the boat that's in the warehouse is going to say Theseus, and the back of the boat that's now sailing who knows where is also going to say Theseus. So what is the real ship Theseus? And your answer to that actually is going to help reveal what your answer to the mind body problem is going to be. So if you answer, for example, and there's lots of different ways that we can go about answering this, but if you answer that you think the real, quote unquote, whatever that might mean, real ship Theseus is the boat that's in the warehouse, well, then you're going to fall more towards the side of thinking that whatever makes you is going to be something immaterial. So whatever a mind is, for example, it's going to be something immaterial. Whereas if you say, well, no, it's definitely that boat that's traveling out, on the sea, well, then you're going to say that, it's more of a physical thing that's making you the person that you are. So how you answer that question ultimately kind of helps inform how you think about this mind body problem. And it's not just the mind body problem that it kind of helps reveal as well. It's been used in a lot of different areas within philosophy.
Mm. Yeah, it's kind of just like a piece of art. It's like, you have the original artwork, but then, we have like people that restore the artwork. So is that restoration still the original piece, or is
Yeah,
it
sure.
not? Yeah. So
Yeah,
it's kind of like,
if
yeah,
somebody
it's,
sits and painstakingly, um, revitalizes whatever, any type of a Van Gogh or something like that, is it, whose work is it then at that point? Yeah, sure. I think that's a good question.
yeah. Because the thing is, neither are the true piece, but together, kind of, they are somewhat the true piece.
Yeah, but then we run into the problem of, say, with the ship example. Well, now we've got two ships. Are they both the ship Theseus? If we want to say they're both the ship Theseus, well, then we run into a whole bunch of philosophical problems with that. Now we've got two things that are equal that are not the same. So that tends to violate the law of non-contradiction, which, well, in philosophy, that's a problem. So, and computer science, I believe that's a problem too.
Yeah.
And as public relations, that would be a problem as well. Yeah. So it's just a problem overall. It's a very interesting question. So what made you think to ask that?
It's because two people in the TV show were actually talking about this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I completely forgot the start of the conversation because I got so interested in your interest in the Ship of Theseus. Yeah. So I guess can you? I don't want to spoil it for me to be kind of egoistic here, but I also don't want you to spoil it for any of your listeners or watchers. Can you tell me the context without spoiling the episode, or do I just have something to look forward to?
Let me think for a sec. There's a lot of good parts of it that I really don't want to spoil since it's just too good. So definitely, I think you just gotta look forward to it.
Okay, I'm perfectly okay with that answer. That's fine.
But I think you'll find it interesting because it's really interesting to see how it works in the context and just like see like what's like the reality of the situation. So
yeah. Cool. All right, I like that.
Yeah. Do you have any other questions? Or
I think we'll get into the audio portion now.
All right, yeah. So we'll get into the audio portion. So it's just gonna be like rapid fire Q&As and things like that. So yeah.
Sure.
So for those who are watching on our YouTube portion, thank you guys so much for watching. Obviously, we love to have conversations with you guys. And also, if you guys want us to talk about anything, let us know on our Instagram, YouTube, things like that. And I think we'll see you guys later. So
yeah, thank you guys for tuning in.